All right, welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we've got Dara Sanders here. We are going to take a look at the BBC police drama Line of Duty, and we're going to be looking at series 1. So it's 5 episodes. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know if there are any movies or TV shows you'd like us to check out. Leave it down in the comments below. But Dara, so I know last time we spoke, you said that you're a huge fan of murder mysteries and police procedurals, and we were kind of like throwing out suggestions like Poirot or Sherlock Holmes,
right?
And you recommended Line of Duty. Now I never heard of this show until you recommended it. What was it about it that made you say, I think Luca would would enjoy watching this? And mind you, I say enjoying quotes, by the way.
Right. Well, like I would say one would, not necessarily you, but one would enjoy this, kind of separate from other police procedurals or murder mysteries, because it's not black and white. It's not we're going after a killer and we catch him. The TV show is kind of all about kind of gathering that evidence and trying to nail him, right? Line of Duty has a lot of shades of gray, and it really challenges you about the police. And I don't want to say their goodness, but like if they are a force for good, so to speak. And so it kind of it gets into this gray area about what the AC-12, which is the anti-corruption unit, is actually doing in their work and if it's valid.
Yeah.
And I think that, over the course of the seasons, they follow a number of police officers, but you kind of get the feeling that, wow, this cop, they're good people, right? I kind of am on the side of the cop. I don't know if I agree with this investigation. So I think that the dividing kind of loyalties, I wouldn't say loyalties, but initially you would think you're watching this, you want, this person committing crimes, you want them arrested, but it's so gray and not exactly easy to unpack. It's not binary, right? It's not a binary choice to me. So it gets very, very it's difficult to watch and root for and so you kind of sit back. Maybe you're a bit neutral and you're just like, okay, let me see what's happening.
Yeah, because throughout series 1, the anti-corruption unit, which is composed of Hastings, who's the superior, Arnott, and Fleming, they're investigating Detective Chief Inspector Gates. And the idea is there's impropriety behind all that kind of got their attention. But meanwhile, Gates is busy investigating what starts off as a murder at a council estate. It kind of snowballs into something far bigger. So let's take a look at the at our 3 protagonists here. So I want to start off with Tony Gates, or Anthony Gates, because Gates is a decorated police inspector. He's gotten rave reviews. Everybody in the force loves him. He's a man who's not sitting there in the office just punching away, idling the time. He's in the trenches. He's with his men. He's getting knee deep. He's like on all fours trying to find out what's going on here. And when you see him in the first episode, you kind of get the feeling that it's a bit mind-boggling that they would go after this guy at all. I mean,
I mean, you're kind of seeing this guy and he's just like, yes, do I look good for the cameras? Kind of, police officer, but with an ego that matches, his confidence, and it's not overinflated necessarily, right? Like, this is a guy that wants the high profile case. The people under him love working for him. And then you hear Hastings say, oh, wow, we're going to investigate him. And you're like, what? Why? What am I missing here? Right.
And mind you, it starts off with him having lunch with a friend, and he nabs I think like a thief or something. Yeah. And he gets and his bill gets paid for by the restaurant.
Right. The waitress says your bill is taken care of. So of course he gets a citation for that.
Mhm.
And then we learn about kind of the laddering. And so we're like, okay, laddering, what is that? And we come to learn that laddering is when you take all the high profile cases that you can close quickly,
Yeah.
and then eventually add on additional charges to make it look even better, versus the low level cases that you're going to have difficulty solving. That affects your conviction rate, all that stuff. So that's what he's being accused of. And it seems like it's a tough one to kind of connect to him. That's kind of what we're learning. And, we're starting to wonder, at least I am, about this anti-corruption unit. I'm like, are these the cases that they do? This is interesting. Laddering. Okay.
I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, having an anti-corruption unit is fine. I mean, obviously, no organization can be clean.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like, come on, I mean, I'm sure there's like a chief constable somewhere who's kind of like, taking money under the table from, a drug lord or something. Surely you should be going after them instead of some guy who's padding his resume and making himself look bigger than he actually is.
Yeah. So I think after the first episode, I'm kind of like, this is weird.
Yeah, you're scratching your head. You're like,
yeah, I'm like really scratching my head. And one thing I'll point out about this show, and I think another thing that when I went back and watched it that I had forgotten was the music. Every episode ends at a climax. Something major happens right at the end, and the music, boom, hits you. What did you think about the music at the end? What did you think about that music?
I mean, it's kind of like a cue, really.
Yeah,
because you kind of get lost in all these different storylines, and it's so easy to because on the one hand, AC-12 is investigating this, Gates is doing that. Jackie Laverty, who's his old flame, kind of comes back into the picture, and then shit hits the fan.
We're learning about what her deal is, right? We don't know her that well,
right? So so the music kind of like lets you know, hey, it's kind of the equivalent of a laugh track if you think about it.
Yeah, but it's still so like I guess that's fair, because I think when we were talking off camera, you mentioned like this is an intense series.
Right. It's a series.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it's a series that kind of grabs you by the collar and like, hey, listen, if you can't keep up, that's on you. Like,
right. But the first, like when I remember when I first saw it, and then the hook at the end when they play that slow, I want to say it's a piano, and it's like it slowly builds and builds and builds and boom, and you're like, whoa, right? Because so much happens in 5 episodes. Like you got the one, and you're like, oh boy, okay, let me unpack all this. Right, all these characters, how do I feel? Am I neutral? What do I feel about the K? All this different stuff. So
right. Well, another thing too is that they don't slow down. They just throw all these things at you because on the one hand, I mean, the main story is following AC-12 because obviously that's the whole point of Line of Duty. But at the same time, you have all these like little storylines. I know, I know you get the little teenage kid who's like, who's trying to like, just try to survive in the tough world.
The one on the bike. Right.
Yeah, Ryan.
One on the bike whose mom doesn't care about him. He's another recurring character. I'll just, I don't know how much you want to watch of this, the whole series, but he's a recurring character.
I'm going to pace myself just because I don't want to like go all in and kind of get burned out. But I will say you kind of, as the series progresses, you kind of get to learn a little bit more about who these people are, but you don't know enough. Just enough to kind of satiate your curiosity.
Right, because we know, okay, there's, as you said, these are the council estates. We have this old man, right, who's made these complaints, right? They're putting stuff through his
garbage. Yeah.
Right? Like, so we know there's a lot going on there, and we learn that's where all the drug dealing is happening. It's very hot, right? The little kid Ryan is collecting burner phones, right? Like it's
he's a courier.
Yeah,
the go
he's
between.
essentially a courier, right? So, and I'm trying to think if we can track in the second episode, we're kind of still, what would I say? By the second episode, definitely is when the hit and run happened. Or it might have been the first episode. But that's when we start to kind of see, oh boy, this is now like the dilemma comes for Gates, right? Because we have Jackie Lafferty. We don't know her as someone at that time that he had a previous relationship early on in his life, but we know they're having an affair now.
Yeah.
And so we kind of know that he wants to help her if he can. And she tells him it's a dog. She ran over a dog.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, okay, what? No big deal. Then that story unravels, right?
Yeah.
We learn that it's a man, and that man was her accountant.
Right. And apparently he, found out a few things that he wasn't supposed to find out. And well, here's the thing: was it Jackie or did someone from the group kind of off him to make it look like Jackie did it?
So because the guy was run over, I kind of got the feeling, and this is not explored really in detail, but I still got the feeling she was solely responsible.
Okay.
But we can't be sure, can we?
Because I mean, she's like in deep with these people. Yeah.
Exactly. So she's now so intertwined with them that she's doing stuff for them, right? She's now heavily involved in they call it the OCGs, right? The organized criminal gangs.
Yeah.
She's so entrenched with them, and they have all these properties that she manages or does something. So you just don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah. Well, another thing too, because Arnett kind of stumbles into it, and I would say he kind of stumbles into it by accident. It's not like, I mean, it's not like he was going after them.
I thought it was very weird how he found that beauty salon, but
that's what I'm saying. Like it was either it was by accident, or Arnett must have like indirectly tied Laverty and Gates to that. Like he must have went on one lead, but then it kind of led him to that for whatever reason.
And let's back up about Arnett, right? Because he's the first police officer we see in the first episode, right? We're introduced to him, and he's the one managing this raid, this terrorist raid at this apartment home, and it's screwed up because I think the flat number was 56, but the place they actually went to was 59.
Yeah, because the numbers,
the numbers were inverted. Yeah. He ends up killing the father who was holding his either son or daughter.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, because he was strapping on the little thing.
Yeah, and so the chief constable in charge, I forgot his name because we see him later in the season.
Yeah, it's the Game of Thrones guy.
Yeah, so he's like, this is the story, this is what we're going to talk about. And then he's just like, I don't know. So we kind of get the feeling that he's not going to lie. And that's kind of our introduction to him as this virtuous man, so to speak, right? Like, and so...
well, virtuous little man, I would add too, because here's the thing, like, throughout the series, like this guy's an eager beaver. This guy will very much nail his colors to the mast and let you know exactly what his intentions are. And I feel like he's overcompensating a lot. Like he just wants to go above and beyond, which is great. But I feel like either he's letting his guilt get to him, or he's just bent on a personal vendetta against the powers that be.
That's an interesting point, because because it seems like he does at least initially have a decent relationship, right, with Hastings. Hastings is he's Irish, from Northern Ireland. That comes out later in the series, but always calls him son, and there seems to be a rapport, right? Like I think Hastings seems to be instrumental in bringing him on. Hastings is the one that dictates the cases they do. And the thing that's interesting to me is his initial feeling about this Gates case is, what are we doing? I don't agree with this, right? Like, he's just like, we're being a bit overzealous, right? So it's interesting the arc he takes as well. I mean, you're talking about him as like overcompensating, and it's almost like, is this kind of how he functions, right? He starts off, and then if he gets a little crumb, now he's going hard, because initially he felt like, why are we investigating this guy? This is so silly. And Hastings tells him, I want to know everything about this man. And so that's when he starts digging in, trying to find out all the history about him. And then it becomes personal to him. You can tell this case is now affecting past his work, now his life. He's completely wrapped up in trying to nail Gates. Now it's personal, right?
Well, I'll also add this too. I mean, there really is no subtlety to him. Like, he's either one or the other. I mean, and as I'm watching the episodes, I'm like, yeah, it's understandable that, you know, that the guys in Gates' squad, they would kind of look at him suspiciously, right? Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's kind of fair, because Arnett kind of enters the scene guns blazing. That's like, it's like, you could try to be a bit more discretionary, kind of work your way and kind of gain their trust, because there's one scene, I think it's episode 4, where they're interrogating Morton, and Morton just keeps saying no comment, and I'm like, had Arnett been a bit more subtle, had he been, you know, a bit more diplomatic, right, less abrasive, I think Morton would have at least been a little bit more giving, right?
Yeah, and that's tough, right? And I think, and again, I love America. I think, you know, Hollywood is great. But when it comes to writing characters, I do think the British are a little better, right? Because they're not hiding this. This guy is not somebody to root for. That's on purpose. That's I mean, he's so unlikable. That's not even by accident. There's no way that's by accident.
But that's the thing, because what I'm saying is that as I'm watching the character, I'm thinking nobody in real life is this zealous. Nobody can be this unlikable. I mean, when you watch Arnott, you kind of get the impression this is a guy who has no social life. He's got nobody at home waiting for him. He's got no friends. And I'll even go so far as to say he's a bit of a one-dimensional character. Really,
he is. I think that's fair. I think he is one-dimensional. But almost
Hastings, you know, what I was going to say, Hastings has a little bit more of a personality, because at least with Hastings, you can sort of see where he, you know, switches off from being, you know, the tough cop every now and then.
Yeah, he switches it off even when Arnott is like gun-ho 100%, right?
Right. Like when he's making tea, for instance. Yeah, like that one instance where he's making tea for him. He's like, he's like, you know, here, let me make you some tea because your hand's all, you know, messed up. Yeah. But I feel, and you said it's written. You said it's written deliberately. I mean, I was gonna say, like, if that's deliberately, they did a pretty shit job, because what you really love about the way that the British write their characters is there's always subtlety to them. They aren't always like this or that.
No, and
Arnott is just. I'm like, dude, like, go have a pint or something. Like, go do something. Right. For God's sakes.
In fairness, I think this is where you start off with the character and is put in a situation, you know, where he's sold out by everybody, right? So he's kind of on an island. He goes to anti-corruption and he's like, boom, I'm going gun-ho. Everybody's corrupt, right? Like, that's kind of, you know, he's seen things he didn't think he would see.
And he was made to do things that he didn't want to do.
Right. So now he's entering this, you know, as you know, with anybody, what you want is for them to have a story arc, mature, all this different stuff. That happens, unfortunately, over the course of the series. But what we're introduced to is somebody that is just broken. That's how I see. He's broken. Like I can't even imagine like you sticking your neck out like that. You're going against literally everyone else.
Yeah, the establishment. Yeah.
Completely everyone else. And the high guy up. This is not even your boss. This is like your boss's boss. It's like, this is the story. And you're like, nope. Like he's on an island and he has no friends. Which is why I think he does these things, right? When he goes and tries to find the glass later on in the season, that Tony Gates had over Jackie Lafferty's house, right? These things where he does it in front of the whole precinct. And it's like, why are you being so overzealous? And so I do think that's intentional.
I mean, but also too, like he paints a target on his back when he doesn't need to. Because to go,
I agree. No, I agree.
Because to go back to the precinct area, like, I mean, what happened with his old unit? I mean, if he doesn't like the fact that what they're doing is to try to cover up for his mistakes,
right?
Fine, that's your prerogative.
Right.
But I mean, if you don't need to go into every single place and just paint a target on your back because he's pissed off his old boss. He's pissing off the precinct, and he's
right.
and then he's pissing off the gangs because we see later on, Gates sells him out to Tommy's gang, and he gets and they kind of do like this Reservoir Dogs thing where they're like tying him up and they're getting ready to.
I know. And you're not exactly like, oh, don't hurt him, right? You're not.
And I told you this too. I was like, if they just taken off a finger, I would have been happy with that. But
and
no.
Then right, okay, so we have Arnott, and he's not sympathetic. So this is weird. You have this anti-corruption unit, line of duty. You would think, off rip, like, God, they have such an important role to do. I'm kind of for them. Now we have Kate Fleming, right?
Right, who's the insider for
she's the
for
insider undercover person. Right.
I'll say this. Fleming is by far the most sympathetic character because she's got to dance between these two groups, and you kind of wonder, and I even wondered sometimes, like, does she really believe in what Hastings is doing?
It was
or is she like,
yeah, I agree, because she's so hard to read, right? Like, so, Kate Fleming is now embedded with this precinct headed by Gates. So she's obviously trying to buddy up with Gates. So now she's trying to be his confidant, so to speak, even though his best friend is Nigel Morton, right? The guy with the cane. So it's interesting because I had a hard time, especially through the first, I would say 3 or 4 episodes, whether or not she believed he was like completely corrupt as events unfolded, right?
I got the impression that she wasn't sold on that.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. Arnott was doing his Arnott thing, but Fleming, I'm like, I couldn't tell where she was. But
to be fair, Arnott is looking from the inside out. I mean,
totally.
And as we said, Fleming, she's on the inside, so she's far more aware of what's going on. She's got a much fuller picture. I wouldn't say bigger picture, but much more fuller picture of what's going on inside. So she's able to navigate the world because we've seen over those 5 episodes, Gates' squad pretty much will do anything to fuck with Arnott. I mean, you remember that one scene they stuck a turd in his car,
right? Yeah, but also what sticks out to me was, so we've discussed this. So first they have the lunch that's paid for.
Yeah.
Next they have the laddering. Then Arnott is investigating this hit and run, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, to me, where Kate Fleming kind of starts to turn up the pressure on Gates and trying to really insinuate herself into his life and say, you can rely on me, boss, all this different stuff, right?
Right. Well, also keep in mind, like she had to like she was basically trying to get into Gates' squad, and I think her friend Rosalind or something was like really pissed off that she got in and she didn't.
Yeah, I mean, this
I think
is
it's Rosalind. I think that's her name.
yeah, I can't remember the long haired black, long haired
Yeah, the brunette. Yeah.
yeah, the brunette. Yeah, yeah. So that was to me kind of interesting because everything is kind of weird. Like Kate Fleming has a job to do, so you figure she's neutral. She's trying to nail this guy. Now we see, I think Arnett discovered that he had deleted, was it a witness statement?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was trying to dump all these files, and somehow Arnett managed to get a hold of them before.
Right before that. So now,
Right.
right, and so that for me, I don't know about you, that to me is kind of the first time we see Gates kind of go over that line.
Yeah, I think yeah I think you and I are in the same boat on that. That's
Yeah,
when that's when you start to say, "Huh, I'm a little bit sus about this guy now."
yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh, yeah, I was kind of with you, but now I don't know. And then, we have um this relationship that once he realizes the truth, you think Gates, okay, we're finished, right? That was his initial message to her. We're
Yeah,
done,
because he eventually
right?
because like you said, she told him there was a dog, and then he comes to find out, oh, you actually killed a guy. Like,
That worked for you,
yeah, like what the fuck are you doing here, lady? Like, and it
right?
makes, and what's even more awkward is the fact that she goes to the police station. And
Right.
Gates is like, and you can see the look on Gates's face. Is like, what are you doing, lady? Like,
Yeah. And so, kind of, so we have these threads that kind of come about where AC-12 is starting to investigate this hit and run. And they're starting to look at Jackie Lafferty and her background and her business. Because, she has a gated, coded, I mean, her house is insane, right? Like, let's be honest. She has a gated house. She's very rich. So we have that. We don't know, how she got that rich. We can assume from the husband. We have also Tony Gates trying to kind of help her, but then also she's kind of pushing her away. He doesn't really know where to go with this, hoping that it'll go away, become unsolved or something like that.
well, it didn't go away because she went to the police station.
Yeah, right. So he's like, we're finished. And then like the weird thing was this episode 3 or 4 where he's like, I'm gonna arrest her.
It's 3 because they go back to the house, and then afterwards the gang members, they break in and they kill her, and then they make it look like Gates did it.
Yeah. So now we're switched. So
Yeah,
now
because Lafferty dies in episode 3.
Right. She dies in episode.
Oh wait, no, 2. Sorry, 2. Sorry.
Right, because so much happened. So like that's the thing. Like you're with Gates, and you're like, I wouldn't do that. Personally, I wouldn't have done that. And now you're like, oh my God, you're so screwed. Right. Once Jackie Lafferty dies, and because it ends on that, right? Because the next we see is Kate Fleming has told Arnott, you need to go. We can't find Gates. You need to go to Jackie Lafferty's house. He ends up there, and there they start investigating her disappearance, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. At that point, he is not implicated with any gang at that point. He's just kind of like, okay, so you went over there. She died. We know you didn't kill her, but now what happened? Because they don't show at all what cleanup he did, anything else, just that Steve Arnott got there and he called backup, and so his team gets there, and now they're investigating her disappearance, right? Yeah. And so then we learn that this OCG is what would you say, kidnapping him. And they give him a burner phone and they say, we have the evidence to essentially blackmail you. We have your fingerprints on the knife. We have her body. And unless you help us, we're going to release this.
So let me ask you. So what exactly? Because I'm still a little bit befuddled by what exactly do they want Gates to do?
So what they're trying to do is separate their connection to her money laundering. one of the things was the beauty salon. And we learned later this guy, Tommy, Tommy Hunter, has additional properties. So once they, Gates's precinct team starts investigating Jackie, ultimately, are they or AC-12 gonna uncover these properties she has? I forgot what they called them. There was a specific word they called these properties where she had some kind of relationship with them. Yeah. Apparently, Tommy Hunter, the OCG head that was always on the phone when Gates was given multiple burner phones, was managing these, and he had multiple ones, and he didn't want to get found out.
So was he like Jackie's partner, or was he kind of like, I guess, like Jackie's quote unquote boss? And
thing. So what I got, he was using these properties to launder money, right?
Right. They were fronts for.
Right. They were all fronts. And so I guess you might argue, not argue, but you might think, oh, well, she didn't know about that. And he's like, no, she knew. She was working for us. So it's kind of a weird situation. She owned the property, but she was aware of their activities.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, I kind of got the feel at first. I was like, maybe she's an innocent party, but then when you find out about the private school stuff, it's like, okay, yeah, she definitely knew. Like,
yeah, and and it's so funny because again, I'm so Team Gates that I was just like, please don't tell me you benefited in any way from her money. But that comes out right in the 4th or 5th episode that she put a down payment down and played for the first quarter for his girls to go to this amazing private school.
Yeah.
But now we have Gates on the take. He's being tasked with hiding or trying to stop the investigation into Jackie's money laundering because this OCG believes it's going to lead to them. So that's kind of where we are episode, because there's so much Luca that happens. Because 5 episodes, it's crazy.
So right. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Tommy was involved with the triple homicide, right, on the council estate.
Definitely was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so the 2 guys that the Gates team had surveillance on. Remember because the whole thing that happened with Cotton was he got there late, or they switched out the assignment.
Yeah, because they were doing the surveillance thing. Yeah.
Right. So there was a time period where nobody was watching. That's when the guys were killed, and the signature is the fingers, right?
And because another thing that I mentioned too, I think, didn't they plant false evidence to make it look like it was like an Islamist attack or something?
Do you mean in the beginning, or I see? So I'm not clear on that
because you remember at the end
they tried to connect it. But I don't remember any spray painting.
Well, I was gonna say, because you remember at the end where Cotton tells Tommy Hunter, we're basically gonna pin this as like an Al Qaeda thing. I could have sworn that they either found like a Quran or some Arabic writing that made that as like a red herring to kind of throw them off the scent.
So when Gates's boss, the swarmy guy, was talking to Arnott's old former boss's boss about the direction they were going, and he mentioned the terrorist connection. I personally didn't know where that came from. And I was trying to scratch my head on that to say, were there clues about that? Did somebody plant something? And I really couldn't tell.
That's what I'm saying, because I thought
I agree.
I thought it was placed there as a red herring to kind of just throw people off the scent, because because if you do that, then the police are going to be like, okay, well, we need to go after, Al Qaeda instead of going after these guys here.
Right, of course. And so that, and just to kind of wrap this up in terms of like the storylines in season 1, you have Detective Chief Inspector Gates realizing that he saw, and was it a phone where he was able to track the phone voice, Tommy Hunter? Remember?
Are you talking about Hastings?
No, Gates. Gates confronts Hunter and arrests him. Remember?
Right, I know that part, but I'm saying like Hastings, Arnott, and Fleming, they go through all the different numbers on the database, and they're like, if one of the numbers gets activated, then they'll know. Like,
Right, they were tracking it. Right,
Yeah.
Sorry, that part is important. That's how they were tracking all the burner phones, because none of them had been active. They had all been used, and usually once they switch out, that one's kind of dead, right?
Yeah.
Like each time they switch out, that one's kind of dead. And so that's interesting that Gates now confronts Tommy Hunter, arrests him, and now tries to get him to confess to everything that Gates is being accused of,
Right.
like of being this OCG head. And so normally in a series, this is the climax where we're like, we get the guy, right? Now we get the guy. This is the guy. He's admitting stuff, not initially, but over time, he starts to admit to being part of the murders on the council estates. There are 3 murders. The one is the 2 guys, and then the one guy that they brought into the police station.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's the Jackie Lafferty thing, right? So Gates tried to get all of that on the record so he can absolve himself. And then Arnott and Fleming are listening. Now, were they listening through? I actually don't know how they were listening.
Well, in the glove box, you see Gates kind of like press, like you see a device, and Gates presses the record button.
Right. There was some kind of device he had so they could hear. So they allow him now, because Tommy Hunter is now in the car, and he's handcuffed, to be, what would you say, killed in the line of duty? Like, I don't know how to describe it, right?
I think they're trying to like take him back to the station so they can so he can like prove his innocence, because remember I think at the end of episode 4 and most of 5, Gates kind of goes AWOL, right?
He does, because I feel like, so what I feel like about Gates was, his feeling was, and he's smart, right? Like that's it, from the beginning, that's the impression I got.
Yeah.
How can I get out of this? Is there any way I can get out of this where I'm free and clear? I can resume my duties, still have my family, all of this. At some point, either at the end of episode 4 or during episode 5, he realizes there's really nothing he can do. And so now he's worried about his daughters and they're being provided for.
Yeah, because
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, don't forget too, Hunter kind of like leaves a calling card for when he kills the family dog.
Yeah.
And kind of lets Gates know, we can get you at any time. So
at any time.
So that kind of sends him off, that basically puts him into survival mode. Really.
Right, because at this point, so he knows that, okay, the police aren't on their trail. So we don't know how many people this gang is comprised of. They're very organized. So, wow. So they know where I live. What can I do? Right? Like, so, yeah, he essentially runs into traffic and is run over by a truck. So his kids can get the line of duty. I think they get a one-time payout, and then they get his pension for life.
Yeah.
And we get kind of a window and kind of a setup for seasons to come. Cotton, who was Gates's deputy, or maybe second in command, third in command, meeting with Tommy Hunter. And he says, this is what I want you to say. Basically allowing him the opportunity to get off scot-free.
Right.
And so the guy calls him the caddy, which is interesting. And this is, I think, the first time we heard this word. So now we're like, well, who is Cotton? And what is going on?
Yeah.
Why would he want him? Right. So that's kind of right in the last 5 minutes of the season. So we're setting up for something bigger than the AC-12. We're setting ourselves up for something that is massive.
Right, and
Because the
having
implications are massive.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, having only seen series, the first series,
Right.
you kind of get the feeling that that there's more to Cotton than meets the eye, and and furthermore, it kind of begs the question, like, who exactly is he working for? Is he working for Tommy, or is he working for someone bigger than Tommy? Because
that's the thing.
Yeah, because I kind of get the impression there's someone over Tommy, like
right. So that's the thing. So now we're like, and I think it's interesting because, and I don't know how you felt about this, Luca. So at the end, obviously we know this is not a true to life case, but at the end, we're giving a summary of what happens after adjudication, right? So we learned that Tommy Hunter got immunity or got off scot-free, and Gates' family got a one-time payout and his pension for life. We find out that the investigation into Gates is essentially closed. So, you see all of that and you're like, well, what did we accomplish here?
Yeah, I mean, it was the runaround.
Right?
I mean, well, another thing too. Well, I'll say this: like they did, they took all the stories that didn't really matter at the end, and they kind of tied it up in a nice bow. So I'll give them props for that.
Okay.
And then whatever's going on with Cotton, I will give him props for leaving that open, because that is a story that's going to continue into further seasons.
It will, and it does. It does.
But at the same time, I will say this: like, they could have executed it a whole lot better. I mean, the characters come off in the story. They come off as comically over the top bad.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So
you're not saying acting bad, you mean personality bad, meaning the structure of the characters, right?
Right. So like for instance, like, Morton, for instance, Nigel Morton, like yeah, I can believe, like, off duty, he's like, he's like trying to be, buddy, but at the same time, it's like nobody can be this big of an asshole, because the way he just treats everybody around him. Because you remember what happened where he like walks behind Fleming, he spits in her hair.
Oh my god, that was like
I'm like, dude,
like, who does that? And I know it was crazy, because I know there are people that are like, we hate snitches, right? You hear it all the time. We hate snitches, all this stuff.
But it's very subtle. Like usually,
but it was so crazy.
I know, and well, another thing too is is the fact that he just, I guess for whatever reason, if you're not in the squad, you get treated like shit by this guy, and when he attacked Kate, I'm like, okay, dude, like, are you serious?
Okay, but in fairness, he had questions about Kate before her cover was blown.
That's true,
and he told them to Gates. He told Gates. Remember who had this information? It was me, Dot, and Kate. And Gates, for some reason, didn't pick up on that. Because, like, to me, I'm like, okay, now literally, Nigel is the only person you could trust.
Right. I mean, although to be fair, Cotton, throughout the entire series, he comes off as kind of difficult to read. I will say that.
He does, but remember, he hangs Gates out to dry about the surveillance that ended in the lack of surveillance that ended in the murder of those two guys who had their fingers cut off.
Right, and he did open up to Hastings.
Yeah, and that's kind of, to us, right? We're like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. The audience is like, why would he do that? Right.
But that's what I'm saying, because by the time you get to episode 5, it's like, what game is he actually playing?
Right.
Because Nigel, you can, you know what he's up to.
He's an open book, right?
Yeah,
right. He's not hiding any. Completely correct.
Right.
He's not hiding anything. He's an open book.
Right. Gates. I mean, he makes some questionable decisions, but you also get the feeling he's a very competent officer who cares about doing his job right. I just feel like out of all the characters, I think Cotton's probably the one who's like the one that you're kind of wondering what's going on with him. Fleming, like I said before, you feel the most sympathy for, because she's got she's got to balance two jobs, and at times you kind of wonder like, how can she keep this up? And
yeah,
then
that doing undercover can't be easy, right? Number one, and then,
well, especially if it's with another police squad, really.
right, but also because you have different threads, right? Initially, you might be investigating this, and then you have to switch to this. So, like for her, it was like this argument that Gates had hidden evidence, right? The glasses, and I think there was something else. And she's like, no, let me try. I'm going to be your confidant. Just tell me where you hid it. I can help you. I can cover this up, like all this different stuff. It's kind of interesting. And, Gates kind of, was like, no, I'm fine. And remember about the money laundering. He was like, I was not involved with that with Jackie. So it gets so like in the weeds. And I think, once the season 1 is over, you're just like, okay, I don't know what the hell AC-12 does. We see Steve Arnott do a complete 360 on Gates, right? He starts off like, why are you investigating him? Then he becomes this dogged person in pursuit. That he shows up at his job, tries to search his car, like all this stuff. And then we get back and Arnott and Fleming are covering for him. So he can die in the line of duty. So clearly they felt like he was essentially clean. So they've now changed their position on him. So now you're looking at the AC-12 and you're like, what do you all do? Like, what?
Well, not to mention the fact, right? I kind of get the feeling even Hastings doesn't know like what line of investigation they need to follow.
Right.
Because to your point, it starts off with that little bill, then it goes with the laddering, then it goes with the money laundering, and then by the end, it's like, I'm sorry, Hastings, like, where are you going with this?
Where are you going with this? And so, like, I know for me, I'm trying to think of the time period between me watching season 1 and season 2. What I like about Line of Duty, just to kind of talk about the series in general, is the police officers that they bring in as these guest stars are serious actors, right? Lenny, I think his name is Lenny James, right? Is the Tony Gates. Second season, the cop is Keely Hawes, and she's known as the real life wife of Tom from Succession. And I think she's way better actor than he is, but she plays the police officer. And the second season, to me, is probably one of the stronger episodes of the entire series because she's so good. And so that's kind of like, I think when I saw the first season, I was so confused about the show and like, what am I learning here? Like, what are we doing here? But it's a jumping off to everything that happens throughout the series.
Well, I was going to say,
you have to watch that first season to understand everything.
Right, exactly. It lays the foundation, but at the same time, I feel like they could have executed it a whole lot better.
I agree. And do you think it was extreme, just to go back and do our quibbles? Do you think it was extreme to do the case in the beginning with Arnott? Do you think that was true to life? Do you think that was fair? That he would be the only one of everyone on the side of the victim?
I mean, I honestly don't know what's going on with that, because as much as you sympathize with Arnott's work, the way that Arnott comes off, it's like any goodwill that you would have kind of gets brushed away. But another thing too is the fact that they keep throwing so many different plot points at you, because it's like, if you had just focused on the one thing, right? Yeah. I think that would have made it a whole lot easier. I think the problem was they were trying to jam pack everything from like, oh, did you know that Jackie and Tony, used to have a thing together? Oh, now that he admitted to his wife, now his wife doesn't want to see him ever again. Oh, but then there's also, the money laundering. There's also this and that. And I'm like, bro, pick a lane and stick with it. Like,
I mean, that to me, that's the thing about the first season that's kind of unique. you introduce one offense, then okay, it's the second offense. Now it just keeps getting ratcheted up. And that to me was kind of a weird place to go with this. You would think Arnott would come on, Fleming is undercover in the precinct, and Hastings already knows that, Gates is this big undercover drug dealer, right? Like that's to me, like before watching the actual case, that's what I would assume. Your AC-12 seems to have a decent amount, like 30 people working for you. You should do valid cases. But the fact that you're like, oh, I'm going to get my best people to investigate this guy getting a free lunch.
Well, here's my thing.
Right?
Here's my thing. I think I'll say this. They killed Jackie in episode 12. I thought that was good because they kind of like starts the action to get you to where you need to at the end.
Yeah.
I think what one of the big mistakes they made was letting Gates die at the end of episode 5. I think Gates should have stayed on for at least another season.
Okay, well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When you see a series like this, so you've now seen series 1.
Right.
Does it make sense to you that each series is covering a different police officer, or do you think it should go to its conclusion and then kind of start up? Like, how would you see this series continue?
So my impression is each season is like a different case, which
but
I mean fine, but what I'm saying here is that I think it would be a whole lot better if you just took that one storyline and kind of carry it from the beginning to end, because I think what would have made it far more interesting is you start off with Gates being this great cop, and then you kind of had this like story arc where he kind of like makes a deal. I think what would have been far more interesting is if they kept coercing him into doing all these things. So ostensibly he's
interesting. Where that was dragged out a bit more, because
right.
only explored to a point, right? Tommy is telling him shut down the money laundering investigation. Gates is like, you don't understand, I'm being investigated from outside police force. There's nothing much I can do. So
but Gates is a resourceful guy. We know that he's a resourceful guy.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that what they should have done was that Gates kind of wises up and he's like, okay, I'll play along for the time being.
Right.
And when you come to find out, Gates is doing his own investigation. So think of it like this. You've got Kate on the inside doing work for AC-12.
Right.
Gates is on the inside kind of doing his own thing, trying to figure out take them down on the inside. Yeah, exactly. And then
I think that's fair. So when you're telling, because we all know historically these British series, you're not going to get that many episodes. This is not going to be an American 22 episode series. Maybe you'll get a max of 8, but it's probably not going over 8. I think this could have probably used another episode, so I kind of agree with you there. So Jackie Lafferty died at the end of 2 or 3.
2, episode 2, because 3 is the one where you have this whole mess with everybody trying to figure out like what the hell's going on with Gates.
So I think that part of it probably could have been a better story arc once he gets blackmailed by the OCG. That probably, but I think that's fair.
Yeah, because at least that way you add more elements to that storyline instead of it being a simple open and shut case.
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously, Jed Mercurio probably wants to do the whole different case, different season, right?
Yeah, but the thing about the different case, different season is we're picking back up on threads that we were introduced to in episode 5. So now we're like, oh, there's somebody named the Caddy. He's doing the work of organized crime and he works for the police force. That's not going away. So that thread is pulled. And then
Well, I was gonna say, but that's the thing. My thing is, had Gates not killed himself, had he, just stayed on, I
Right.
think that would have been a very interesting storyline for Gates to kind of learn about. Oh, there's this guy named the Caddy, and then Gates kind of gets interested, and he starts doing his own digging to try to find out who the Caddy is, not realizing the Caddy is the guy who's the second in command.
And that's the thing. Like it's an interesting point. It's this series to me is so interesting because everything is gray. That's why I recommended it to you, because everything is so gray. I'm sure we'll have an email conversation about season 2 is the grayest of the gray, and it just continues like that. And there are seasons where the cop that is the corrupt cop dies within 3 episodes, and now you're like, what the heck, right? Like it's so unpredictable, it's so tense, it's just different. It's not formulaic, of course,
right?
But I do take your point about the portrayal of Arnott in season 1. I'd like for you to look at series 2 and 3 and tell me if you feel that way still.
Right.
Because I think that character was developed like that on purpose.
Right.
It was a long haul. Right.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, based on what you're telling me, it sounds like they're playing the long game in that, which is fair, but at the same time, it's like,
right, but it makes for a disappointing season, right? Like overall, what would you, scale of 1 to 10? What do you give series 1?
I mean, I would give it probably 2 out of 5, and I'll even say this: it feels like what they're doing is they're willing to sacrifice the season if it means they can tell a much greater story. That's what. Yeah,
I think that's honestly, Luca. I think that's fair. It's like we have to start out, and the case is kind of rushed, right? Like so weird, kind of how one goes. It's very uneven, kind of, and not fleshed out. And so it's just, as you mentioned, a place setter, and it sets up later seasons. That's essentially the point of series 1.
But I'll tell you what the irony is that usually whenever you have a TV series, usually the last season is the season where everybody says, yeah, that was really crap. I don't know what they were thinking. It seems like here it's kind of the reverse. It's like it's the first season.
Sacrifice. Right, yeah. It's the sacrifice. Yeah, that is actually that is interesting.
And if you think about it, like if you watch the first season and you're not thrilled by it, you kind of wonder, well, what's my incentive to watch the next season?
It's interesting. When you saw Cotton talking to Tommy Hunter in that weird stationary police van, and you realize they're somehow working together, were you intrigued?
Slightly. I was slightly intrigued, but at the same time, Cotton is one of those people that you just don't really, and it may have been intentional. He's one of those people that you don't really notice. He's just he's someone who hangs out in the background. I mean, Morton gets more attention than him. Really.
Fair. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
I mean, yeah, you see more and you hear more from Morton than you do from him.
That to me was, I would guess, what Jed is thinking in terms of further down the road.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to introduce you to this serious network that involves police officers that AC-12 is not even aware of.
Yeah, like it's some sort of secret cabal or something.
Right, exactly. And so that's now where we're being introduced to it. And that might be something that, a viewer might say, okay, well, what's going on here? What is this about?
Yeah.
Or they might say, yeah, this isn't for me. I don't know why I had a big layoff between watching series 1 and series 2. Once I saw series 2, I was completely hooked.
Yeah. It's such a weird way of doing things, though. You know what I mean?
It's fair.
Because for instance, when I watched series 1 of Slow Horses, by the time I got to the last episode, I was like, God, I really hope they do another season. Like, I'm really intrigued by this. Here, it's like I could care less. Like, if they do another series, all right. I mean, that's great.
Because what you're telling me is you don't have a feeling one way or the other about Hastings. He's just kind of wallpaper.
Yeah,
Arnott did not, right? Arnott did not have an impression on you. Fleming is a maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like, she seems to be, look, she has a job, she does her job. So, like, Gates is now dead. So, like, I really don't know what then is your incentive to say, I want to keep going on this.
Well, I was gonna say, like, the only incentive right now is the fact that you're telling me that series 2 is far better. So
series 2 is my favorite because of the performances, but that's when you really get to the nitty-gritty of what Line of Duty is about.
Right. So what would you say?
It should be season 1, right?
Right.
That.
So what would you say would be your score for series 1?
Series 1, to me, I'll concede it's disjointed. I will concede that Arnott is not fully fleshed out. He's not a sympathetic character. Hastings is in the background. He's wallpaper. Fleming, I honestly, she was not my favorite in this.
Really? Okay.
She was not my favorite in this, but I recognize she had a job to do. I give the series 1 a 3 out of 5.
Okay, so we're both
because I was like, oh my god, like everything happening as each episode came. I'm just like, oh my god, like the developments were what kept. This is a show that locked me in after series 1, episode 1. It locked me in.
I mean, I will say this. I think I felt like I kind of had whiplash just because you kind of turn your head everywhere.
True. It's a lot.
Well, I will say this. It's also an acquired taste. Like there's some shows that you watch and you fall in love with it. Others you kind of have to, watch more of it to kind of let it grow on you. And I feel like that's what Line of Duty is kind of like it's an acquired taste.
Well, it's interesting. It depends on, there's so many factors that go into, like, when you rate a show, like, especially, Great Britain is good for the lone detective, right? And they're the ones that kind of drive the story. So you kind of have to like them to like the show. It's
very much character driven. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one's more plot driven.
Exactly. So it's definitely not that. Sometimes what drives a show is the case. I'm a fan of anthology series. I do like this idea of having, like Line of Duty does, a different police officer every series, but then having these side plot lines, I don't know if that's too much for somebody to follow.
It's very distracting.
Right.
I mean, if you look at something like True Detective, they're able to accomplish the same thing, and yet do it very well, and yet somehow Line of Duty is very cack-handed in the way that they approach it. It's like I'll say it's like this. It's if the guys at True Detective are using a scalpel, then Jed Mercurio is using a sledgehammer every time with Line of Duty. That's what it feels like to me.
That's unfair. I will say, and I'll reiterate, this is a place setting series. Mm-hmm. They got the kinks out. It's not a perfect series, but this is a very good show overall. And that's why I would recommend kind of continuing with it. I'm not saying, you're going to love every series, but I would say at least season 2 is worth watching.
So really season 2 would be like the ideal season 1.
Make or break.
Really.
Make or break. Yeah. That's the make or break. Yep.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very intense discussion we've had. But yeah, just go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what you think. Is this a show that you're interested in watching, or do you feel like there are other shows that are much better than Line of Duty? And as always, remember, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.